Welcome to Conversations Live. For more than a decade, we've brought you the best in books, entertainment, celebrity interviews, and current events. When the movers and shakers of the world have something to say to you, they say it to us first. Now celebrating 17 years of broadcasting success, here's your host, Cyrus Webb.
And welcome back, everyone, to Conversations Live. I'm your host, Cyrus Webb. Glad you all could join us once again, both for our radio audience here in Mississippi at WYAD 94.1 FM and WYADonline.com. We're glad that you all could be with us. Also, just tuning in through our friends around the world, thanks to iHeartRadio and Amazon Music Podcasts. We're glad you all could be with us as well. I'm so excited to welcome back best-selling author Karin Slaughter to our program today. Karin has a great book that is perfect for the time that we're in today. It's called False Witness. I'm going to talk to Karin not only about the writing of the book, but because it does mention some things that I think some of us will recall over the past year and a half. We'll talk to her about when she wrote this book and what it's been like for her to now to share these characters with the world. Karin, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Well, Karin, I have to say, and not as a spoiler or anything, but I have to say, out of all the books I've read in the past year and a half, this is the first novel I've read that has included, of course, the pandemic. I've read several nonfiction books that have. I mean, this book is so timely. Of course, that is just really a small part of this story that is so big and so intricate. But how does it feel now to be able to share a false witness with the world?
It feels pretty nice to have this thing I've been working on in private by myself for a full year to finally have it out in the open. And it was a pleasure to write, just the escape of it. I know we all started reading different kinds of books during the pandemic to help take us away from what was going on, and this was my escape, was to write this.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that about the time, because, I mean, like I said, it definitely is timely because of one layer of the story they were able to see with one of the characters, Callie. But once again, even with the main character, or I guess I should say one of the main characters, Lee Collier, we're able to see, I mean, what has become a thing we've gotten to love about you, and that is, I mean, the way you're able to play with right and wrong, good and bad, but also the what-if scenario right in life. Is that kind of one of the fun things for you as a storyteller, Karin, to be able to ask us to put ourselves in the character's position and what we would do in that situation?
Absolutely. And, you know, you don't always have to agree with their choices, but I think you need to understand them because I try to write as realistically as possible. So you do have the character Lee, who's a lawyer, who's at the top of her game. She's at this white shoe law firm in Atlanta, and she really has everything together as far as being a mom, and she's negotiated a really good agreement with her ex-husband, and she's just rocking along until something really bad happens that brings up the past and brings her sister Callie back into her life.
And that is just part of the fun there. You mentioned her relationship with her separated husband, I guess. It's a really interesting relationship in itself, I think, for many things. But there's one thing that came up in the book, Karin, I said I definitely want to talk to you about, because there's this great moment between the two of them, which really shows still, you know, the love and admiration, where you have, I mean, the main character, Lee, again, talking with Walter about making peace. And one of them talks about how it's easy to make peace with the dead. You know, some would say it's easier to make peace with the living. That's an interesting conversation the two of them are able to have. What has that been like for you to play with in your books? Because that is one of the things that your characters do have to grapple with, you know, being able to make peace with what has happened, but also what is in front of them.
It's a really difficult thing. I mean, it's kind of the key to being a human being is, can you move on from trauma, or are you mired in trauma? And there's really no right way to do it. I mean, some people are able to compartmentalize, some are not. And I wanted to show that contrast with Lee and Callie. You know, Lee is someone who is always looking forward, because, you know, looking behind her could be a really scary thing. And Callie is someone who can't even look more than a few hours ahead in her day, you know, because she's so obsessed with what happened in their past. And you know, there's no right or wrong way. One, of course, you can look at from a reserve and say, hey, well, how Callie's doing it is really horrible and destructive. But, you know, compartmentalizing for Lee hasn't been that successful for her either. She's lost a lot because of it.
Well, I think, you know, again, that is the thing. There is another exchange you mentioned with Callie, another great dialogue, Karin, that you have in the book False Witness, where Lee is talking to Callie and says, "I can't let you do this. It's too hard." And Callie then quotes back Lee's own words to her, "Everything's hard for everybody." And I think that is something that does come up in this book. Let's talk about Callie for a minute, and we'll talk around things, Karen, so we don't spoil it. But she is, I think some would say on the outside, the most damaged of the characters in this book, right? I mean, she seems to have gone through a lot in her past in the book. She's going through something even presently. What was she like for you to create?
She was a lot of fun. I mean, she's a troubled character, but was fun to create. But she was also an opportunity to talk about addiction through the lens of someone who you're supposed to be rooting for. Normally when we see people who are addicts, they're either criminals or they're somehow pathetic or, they're just kind of stereotyped into these two lanes. And I wanted to show addiction from the inside, what it's like day to day, how the physical addiction is one of the hardest parts to overcome, but also the emotional addiction. I mean, people don't fall into drug use generally by accident. So with Callie, I wanted to humanize that. And, just as a hat tip to my friends in Mississippi, they're probably the only ones who will understand that Callie is short for Calliope, not Calliope. That's something I had to talk to my audiobook readers. I was saying it's like in Mississippi, and they still didn't get it. So I'm glad that my readers there in Mississippi will get the joke.
Yeah, and I have been one of those people to mispronounce myself. So
it's a hard one when you grow up with it.
Right, exactly. So I totally understand. I want to say for those who are just tuning in, either on the radio side or online, you're listening to Conversations Live. We're so excited to welcome back Bestselling author Karin Slaughter. Karin celebrating a brand new book that is perfect for the times we're living in right now. It's called False Witness. Of course, you'll be able to get it through our friends at Amazon.com or through your favorite local bookstore. And speaking of local bookstores, Karin, the world is definitely evolving from when you wrote this book. Things are opening up. There's still, some cautious optimism that we're on our track now to a new sense of normalcy. How does it feel now to be able to have the prospect of being able to engage with readers again?
I'm really excited about it, and we actually had an event last night here in Atlanta, and everybody was masked and being careful and cautious, and it was really great to go and see my readers, having been away from it for 2 years. And I hope that we can do more as things open up more. But, of course, we want to keep people safe. That's our primary goal.
Right. And I think that is the dance of it, right? I mean, I think we all are ready to move on. Because, and of course, but like you said, it is important for us to be mindful of that. We see that again, even the effects of the pandemic in Callie's character, at least. Did you know going into False Witness that you almost had to mention the pandemic in some way?
Well, I thought it would be interesting to kind of capture how crazy our lives have gotten. I mean, it's a very small part of the book. It's not about the pandemic, but people are masking, and at least in Lee's world, because she's a lawyer, she's into this white shoe firm, so everybody has the luxury of being able to take their health very seriously. Callie's life, on the other hand, is, it's kind of a joke to her that her health is important, right? Because she has to be out there in the front line. She has to be doing whatever she needs to do in order to survive. So it was a great way to show those differences. And, I started thinking about these characters about 3 years ago, but when I really sat down to work on the story, it kind of evolved that I would include this. I mean, I don't know about you in Atlanta. A lot of distilleries changed out rum and tequila for hand sanitizers. So everywhere you went, it smelled like, under the bleachers at the prom. Things like that I thought would be really interesting to capture.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, it is, and I do want to stress that to our audience. What I mentioned also, it is in the book. It definitely is not what the book is about. The book really, I think, for me, one of the big things is, and I can't really talk about it because people haven't all read it yet, but Karin, one of the big things for me, though, is the what would you do scenario, and that is something that you have played with in other books. But I think it takes an interesting turn in this because it's not just Lee thinking about herself. It's also, I'll say this part, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, it's also her thinking about Walter. And even though things are different for them, being able to be mindful of that. And I think it really goes to that. Does that go back for you, though, to kind of go full circle with this conversation, to kind of the humanness of your characters, that that's something all of us think about. What if this does happen? What are we willing to do not only for ourselves but also for those we love?
Absolutely. And I think that we're living in this kind of weird time where people aren't allowed to make mistakes, at least not publicly. We're very unforgiving right now. And I wanted to talk about Lee and the guilt she carries because of this act that happened when she and Callie were younger that's still haunting both of them. And to think about forgiveness and, people just make bad mistakes sometimes, and we need to look at them in context and maybe not punish them so hard for doing something we might have done in the same situation.
Yeah. That is such a big point, Karin, because, again, we would want that same thing. However, I do think it's interesting, though, in Lee's case, her being in the profession she's in, right, where forgiveness is not always something that comes up. I think it's interesting that she has to grapple with that for herself, even the forgiveness of self, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, because she's a defense attorney, I think it makes her really good for her clients. She understands people make mistakes. Despite their crimes, she likes a lot of her clients. Many people who do criming are good people, and they just make bad decisions and keep making bad decisions until they get caught. And her job, as she sees it, is to keep the government responsible and fair for her clients, not to overcharge them or to really punish them into the ground. And unfortunately, as Lee says, it's better to be guilty and rich than it is to be innocent and poor. So she's a lawyer who helps rich people get off.
Again, it's what makes this character and so many of your characters beloved to so many readers, Karin. So glad we had a chance to spend this time with you. Again, everyone, Karin Slaughter has been our guest. The new book is False Witness, out now through our friends at Amazon.com or your favorite local bookstore. Karin, really appreciate this time. How can our audience stay connected with you?
If they want to see my cats, they can look at my Facebook page, or they can go on to KarinSlaughter.com. That's Karin with an I, and I'm on all the socials, and, of course, the book's available everywhere.
Right. Karin, thank you again. Really appreciate it. Congratulations to you again, and looking forward to our next conversation together.
Yes, thank you.
You're more than welcome. And we thank your audience for tuning in to another great segment of Conversations Live. Until next time, I'm your host, Cyrus Webb, saying, as always, enjoy your day, enjoy your life, enjoy your world. Thank you all for choosing Conversations Live. Now let's go make today amazing. Take care.